This hook plays on the theme of redemption, making viewers eager to see how the protagonist proves everyone wrong and achieves success. My name is Rachel Morgan, and the last thing my mother ever said to me was, "You ungrateful brat, get out and don't come back." There was no thunderclap, no smashed plate, no dramatic door slam echoing through the hallway like in the movies. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the flick of her wrist, and her voice cold enough to silence even the air. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I didn't say a word. I just turned, picked up my keys, and walked out. Not because I was strong, but because I had no strength left to argue. That night, the Oklahoma sky was a deep blue with no clouds in sight. The stars hung quiet, indifferent. I stepped into my car with nothing but a duffel bag, my laptop, and a teddy bear I hadn't touched in years. As I pulled away from that suburban house in Tulsa, I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a stranger escaping a burning home no one else could see. I didn't go far. Just 90 miles north to a one-bedroom apartment in North Oklahoma City, creaky floors, mismatched furniture, and a broken ceiling fan that rattled in protest every time it spun. But it was mine. No passive-aggressive notes stuck to the fridge. No doors slammed, just loud enough to sting. Just a quiet, so unfamiliar, it felt like another language. But silence wasn't peace yet. My phone buzzed 3 times in a row. Then again. Then again. I watched it tremble across the chipped kitchen table like it too was trying to escape. The screen lit up with names I knew better than my own reflection. Mom, Dad, Jesse, looping like some cruel alarm I forgot to disable. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the sound. 6 months ago, I was still tethered emotionally, financially, invisibly. Now I just stared and let it ring. The last message that came through wasn't even from my mother. It was from my younger brother Jesse, the golden boy of our family. "You really left them like this. You should be ashamed." Ashamed? After everything, this family had learned to use shame like a leash. And for years, I let it pull me in every direction they wanted until the leash broke. And in case you've ever been in that place too, where you walk away not because you hate them, but because staying is the thing that's killing you, then you know. You know the silence isn't quiet at first. It's loud. It screams all the what-ifs, all the guilt, all the echoes of you're selfish if you leave. But let me tell you something. If you've ever walked away just to survive, leave a like. And stay with me. Because this story, it doesn't end where most people expect it to. It begins here with the moment I stopped mistaking pain for love. The first few nights alone were the hardest. Not because I missed anyone, but because I didn't know who I was without them. You spend enough years being the emergency contact, the ride, the bill payer, the fixer. And when that noise stops, all you hear is your own breath. I'd sit on my thrifted couch listening to the ceiling fan creak, half expecting someone to barge through the door demanding I fix something. Jesse's credit card bill, Dad's prescription refill, Mom's cable package. But the door stayed shut, and the silence stayed steady. I stared at the walls of my apartment, beige and uneven, the corners chipped, and I thought, this is the first space I've lived in that doesn't expect anything from me. It doesn't need me to hold it up. I was still figuring out what it meant to belong to myself. Then the messages started again. "Rachel, please answer. It's important. Jesse is overwhelmed. He's struggling. He needs you." They didn't ask how I was. They never did. They only reminded me like clockwork of how Jesse was drowning, how the house was falling apart without me, how the family was suffering because of me. Funny how I'd been invisible for 31 years. But the moment I stopped giving, I became the villain in their story. Jesse, my younger brother by 4 years, had never kept a job longer than 3 months, never paid rent, never even changed a light bulb. But he always had the newest phone gaming chair and someone to pick up the slack. That someone, me. While I was grinding 60 hours a week in a downtown insurance firm, Jesse was still trying to find his path. While I was clipping coupons and skipping meals to make rent, Mom was buying him new sneakers and defending his every failure. I used to think if I just worked harder, they'd see me. Really see me. Not as the background character, but as someone who mattered. I used to think that love meant proving yourself even if no one asked for proof. I used to think loyalty meant silence. But silence, I've learned, is just another way they erase you. And the moment I stopped replying to their guilt-laced messages, something inside me shifted. It didn't roar. It didn't explode. It just stopped hurting. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was tired. And sometimes tired is all it takes to finally put the weight down. When I look back, there wasn't one massive betrayal that drove me out. It was the slow erosion, like rust, like mold, invisible until it's everywhere. Like the day Jesse scratched Dad's Ford F-150, a truck he called his third child. And instead of holding him accountable, they asked me if I did it. I was 11. And I'd been at school all day. But logic didn't matter. Jesse sat at the table with cold pizza in his hand, unbothered. Mom didn't even flinch. That was the day I learned truth didn't matter in our house. Only narratives. And I was never the favorite character. I wasn't their pride, I was their placeholder. A stand-in for stability, a scapegoat for mistakes, and later, their invisible wallet. But all of that's only the beginning. Because once they realized I wasn't coming back, they started calculating how much I was actually worth to them. And that was when everything really began to unravel. I never meant to become their safety net. I didn't apply for the job. There was no contract, no interview, no thank you note. It just happened. One emergency at a time. The first time Mom asked me for money, I didn't even blink. Just the gas bill, she said. It's only $190. Your dad forgot to pay it. I'll Venmo you tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. But back then I didn't care. I was making a decent salary. I could handle a few bills right. That's what I told myself. That's how it starts. Not with demands, but with guilt wrapped in soft words. You're the responsible one, the strong one, the one who always has it together, so of course you help. Then came the electric bill, then the water, the internet, car repairs, Jesse's overdraft fees, Dad's prescription. Just until next week, just this one time. You know we're struggling. I told myself I was just being a good daughter, a good sister, a good person. But what I was really doing was disappearing. I started skipping lunches to make up for the extra money I was sending home. I turned down a weekend getaway with friends because Jesse needed a new laptop for design school. Spoiler, he dropped out 3 weeks later. Mom said it's just not his learning style. Meanwhile, I was working overtime, dragging my exhausted body home after 12-hour days, heating instant noodles and falling asleep on the couch with my shoes still on. One weekend I stopped by the old house, arms full of groceries, paper towels, detergent, almond milk. Jesse was sprawled across the couch, gaming headset on feet on the coffee table. He didn't even look up. Mom called from the bedroom. Did you get your father's cookies? No, hello. No, how are you? Just expectation. I opened the fridge. The only thing in there that belonged to me was a half-used bottle of lemon juice and a single bottle of water. Everything else was theirs, just like everything else in that house had always been. That night I went home and opened Excel. I created a spreadsheet. Column A, electricity. Column B, water. Column C, groceries. Column D, Jesse's credit card. Column E, Dad's medication. Column F, gas. And on the last line, after summing up 6 months, I saw it. 16,430.87. That's how much I had given. Not as gifts, not as generosity, but as expectation. No reimbursements, no thank you. No, are you doing okay, Rachel? Only more requests. Only silence when I said no. And when I finally started pushing back just a little when I refused to drive Jesse to get his license renewed. Mom called, her voice trembling. You've changed. Dad texted, you need to know your place. Jesse sent one message, don't think a little money makes you special. That was the moment I knew. It was never about love. It was about access. What I gave didn't matter. The moment I stopped giving, I became disposable. And if you've ever been told you were selfish just because you finally kept something for yourself, then maybe, just maybe, you weren't selfish at all. You were just waking up. The day I truly woke up wasn't some big epiphany. It was a Saturday, late spring. I left the office close to 6 p.m., still holding the lunchbox I hadn't touched all day. There was a migraine pounding behind my eyes from too much screen time, too much stress, and too little air. But I still stopped by Whole Foods like always because Mom had texted me a list. 2 bottles of almond milk, lean ground beef, organic olive oil, whole grain bread. The total came out to nearly $175. Not counting the snacks I threw in for Jesse. Not that he'd ever said thank you. He didn't need to. Gratitude wasn't part of the deal. Expectations were. I drove nearly 40 minutes to the old house in East Tulsa. The house I'd paid for in part with late nights and unpaid weekends. My stomach twisted as I turned onto the street, not out of nostalgia, but dread. The kind that sits in your chest and pretends to be obligation. The front door was slightly ajar, like they were waiting. I nudged it open with my shoulder hands full. No one came to greet me. The only sound was a reality TV show buzzing from the living room. Jesse's kind of show. I dropped the bags on the counter. My eyes stung, not from tears, but from the strong lemon cleaner Mom always used when she wanted to prove the house was managed. I was the one buying the supplies, but it was her show to run. Then she appeared. Framed in the doorway, arms crossed, voice sharp. "We need to talk." "I just got off work," I said softly, still in my heels, still holding one grocery bag by the strap. "Can I get a minute?" "No," she snapped. "This has been put off long enough." Dad was behind her, silent as always. Jessie didn't even look up from the couch. And that's when it began. The ambush. "Rachel, Mom said you have a job, a car, your own apartment. This household is struggling. Your father is tired. Jesse's still trying to find his way. I think it's time you contribute more." More? I stood there still holding her groceries. "I've been paying for the electricity, gas, water, internet, and part of the mortgage," I said carefully. "Over $1,000 a month every month for almost 2 years. Dad's voice chimed in flat. "We're talking about responsibility. Family means responsibility." I stared at them all. My throat tightened. "Then what is Jesse?" I asked. "A guest with free rent." Jesse finally turned his head. "Don't drag me into this," he scoffed. "If you want to stop paying, just stop. Spare us the fake generosity." I laughed. A dry, brittle sound that didn't even reach my chest. "The problem is I wasn't faking it," I said. "I actually was generous." Mom slammed her hand on the table. "You're getting more selfish every day, Rachel. Living on your own has made you cold. Do you even realize this house is in danger of foreclosure? Jesse's student loan was denied. Your father lost his insurance." I looked around. At the walls I'd helped keep standing. At the people who never once asked if I'd eaten dinner after work, if I could pay rent and still sleep at night. "So what is this?" I asked. "A negotiation? You want my whole paycheck? You want me to buy Jesse a new car? Pay the mortgage in full?" Jesse stood up, face flushed. "You're out of line." And maybe I was. But in that moment, standing in the same kitchen where I'd once learned to boil pasta at 14, while Mom tended to Jesse's scraped knee, I realized something. The only thing more exhausting than being used is pretending you're not. And that's when I knew this wasn't my home anymore. It never really had been. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, grocery bag still on the counter, my work badge still dangling from my neck, and said in the calmest voice I could muster, "Then this house no longer has a daughter named Rachel." The room went silent. Not the kind of silence that follows an argument, but the kind that follows a truth no one was ready to hear. Jesse stood frozen, controller still in one hand, mouth slightly open. Dad stared at the floor like it might offer him some script he could read from. Mom just looked at me with the same expression she'd used when I forgot to fill up the gas tank in high school, disappointment laced with disbelief but never regret. "Get out," she hissed. "If you dare turn your back on this family now, don't you ever come back." The words didn't cut like they used to. They didn't pierce through my skin like barbed wire. They just echoed. Dad looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. Jesse smirked like he'd won something. I thought I might say one last thing, but I didn't. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel pain. I felt light. I turned around, picked up my bag, and walked out. The air outside was colder than expected. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the Tulsa sky with streaks of orange and ash. I moved slowly, like someone waking from anesthesia, like someone remembering their body belonged to them. I set the groceries on the passenger seat, got behind the wheel. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. No shaking, no tears, no guilt, just space. A kind of empty I didn't need to fill. As I drove back toward my apartment, the silence in the car felt like a reward. Not an absence, but a presence. A reminder that no one was waiting to drain me. No one was demanding receipts. No one was asking for just one more thing. When I got home, I carried the bags up the stairs, unlocked my door, and stepped into a place that didn't punish me for being tired. I dropped my coat over the chair, slipped off my shoes. The faint scent of lavender still lingered in the air from the oil diffuser I barely used. I poured a glass of water and sat down on my couch, an old, faded thing I found at a garage sale, but it cradled me better than any leather sectional at my parents' house ever did. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the spreadsheet, total given since January 19, 8/40/17. I scrolled to the bottom and added a new line. Final expense freedom, cost priceless. And then I closed it. I didn't need to see it again. That night I slept for 8 full hours. Not a single dream. No jolting awake to a buzzing phone. No whispers in my head asking if I'd done enough. just the soft hum of the ceiling fan above and the steady rhythm of my own breath. If you've ever walked away from people who only loved you when you gave, if you've ever whispered enough and meant it, then you know that kind of sleep. And if this part of my story is speaking to a part of yours, I hope you'll leave a comment, not for me, but for you. Let it be a little reminder to your future self, you are allowed to rest. You are allowed to keep something for yourself. 3 days later, I found myself standing in my tiny kitchen frying eggs in an old pan I bought for $10 off Facebook Marketplace. The butter hissed softly. The coffee was already brewed, the smell thick in the air filling every inch of my second-floor apartment like warmth I didn't know I missed. And the strangest part, no one was calling, no pings from Venmo, no guilt-laced texts, no sudden "Rachel, can you just..." interruptions to my morning peace. For the first time in years, I ate breakfast without checking my bank account first. And I didn't feel guilty. The breeze drifting through the open window was cool for early April. I wrapped myself in a thrifted cardigan and stood at the sill staring out at the street. Nothing special out there, just a few parked cars, a neighbor jogging by, a dog barking in the distance. But it felt like something sacred, because I wasn't responsible for anyone in that picture but me. I began to build something I didn't think I'd ever have a rhythm that was mine. Every evening after work, I shut my laptop by 6 p.m. No more quick emails, no more just 5 minutes that turned into 2 hours of unpaid overtime. I signed up for a yoga class on Wednesdays. On Saturdays, I walked to the local farmer's market, where I learned that spring tomatoes are sweeter than you'd expect. I bought books again. Not finance books, not professional development PDFs, but real novels. Stories with pages that smelled like ink and hope. I planted herbs on my balcony, rosemary, lavender, mint. I overwatered the mint plant by accident, but somehow it still lived. And that felt like something. Because if even a drowning mint leaf could find its way back to green, maybe I could too. It was in those quiet moments, the ones without obligation or noise, that I started to understand something I'd never been allowed to before. Silence wasn't danger. In the old house, silence was always a warning. If Mom was silent, she was angry. If Dad was silent, he was disappointed. If Jesse was silent, he was calculating. Silence meant a storm was coming. But here, silence just meant peace. No one needed anything from me, and that wasn't selfish. It was freedom. I stopped waking up with my stomach clenched. Stopped sleeping with my phone under the pillow like a panic button. I opened a new savings account just for me. Not to cover someone else's rent, not to repair Jesse's car, just a small nest for a future I hadn't dared to plan for before. A trip to Colorado, maybe? A new laptop that didn't freeze every time I opened Excel? Maybe even a financial advisor to help me build something long-term, something no one could take from me. And on one particular Sunday morning, while sipping cold brew on my tiny balcony, I read a line in a book that hit harder than any voicemail my mother had ever left. You don't owe anyone the slow erosion of your life just to keep them comfortable. I read it 3 times. I dog-eared the page. Let the words sink into me like sun through the clouds. Because for years, that's exactly what I'd been doing. Letting my light dim to keep others from squinting. Dulling my edges so no one else would feel cut. But I was done apologizing for surviving. Done giving more just because they'd trained me to give until I vanished. And if you've ever been there, ever silenced yourself just to keep the peace, then maybe it's time to unlearn that too. You deserve more than survival. You deserve a life that's yours. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early May when I ran into Macy, an old college friend I hadn't seen in almost a decade. We were both attending a professional seminar downtown, one of those stuffy hotel conference rooms where the AC is always too cold and the coffee tastes like cardboard. She spotted me first, waved from across the room, eyes wide with surprise. We grabbed lunch during the break. She didn't ask me about my job or whether I was dating anyone. She didn't dig for gossip. She just looked at me and said softly, "You're doing better, aren't you? You look like the Rachel I knew back in freshman year, only stronger." I just smiled. No long explanation. No reciting the trauma timeline. The way I sat, shoulders relaxed, not checking my phone every 30 seconds, not clutching my bag like someone was about to snatch something from me, was answer enough. That was the day I realized healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the absence of panic. I hadn't blocked my parents or Jesse, but I had done something far more powerful. I turned off notifications. Not to hide, but to stop being dragged back in. And over the next few weeks, the messages still came. Some were aggressive. Some pretended nothing had happened. and some were pathetic in their desperation, but I didn't reply. Because I'd finally learned that not responding doesn't mean you're cruel. It means you understand the difference between forgiveness and access. Then one evening, while I was organizing receipts for work expenses, I found it wedged between junk mail and credit card ads, a slim white envelope. Return address, Bank of Tulsa, sender Mary Morgan, recipient Rachel Morgan. I opened it without thinking. Third mortgage delinquency notice? My fingers froze, my breath hitched. I set the letter down carefully like it might burn through the table. And then came the message. From Dad. Just 8 words, Rachel, why haven't you paid this month? No greeting, no question mark, no context. Just a sentence that sliced through me with surgical precision. Like my absence was a clerical error. Like I'd missed an automatic draft. Like I still belonged to them. I stared at the screen, reread the words 3 times. My eyes caught on paid as if it were my role etched into my name, Rachel Morgan, daughter, donor, default setting. I closed my laptop, took out my phone, opened my banking app. For the past 6 months, I hadn't sent them a single dollar. And yet, they still believed I would come through. Apparently, they thought I was just on pause, not done. And if you've ever stopped giving only to find people still think they're entitled to you, you'll understand exactly what I did next. But before I tell you what happened when I made that final call, tell me this. Have you ever had to walk away from people who only showed up when they needed something? If so, drop a comment below. Not because I need your story, but because you deserve to tell it out loud. You deserve to be heard. And if you believe in choosing your own peace over inherited obligation, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There's more than one kind of family in this world. And sometimes the one you build starts with a single terrifying no. I sat there for a long time after reading that message. Not in anger, not in sadness, just in disbelief. Rachel, why haven't you paid this month? Like I was a broken vending machine. Like the problem wasn't the years I gave, it was that I'd suddenly stopped. No mention of how I was doing. No, are you okay? Just where's the money? I pulled up my old payment history. $300 a month, every month for nearly a year. To help cover the mortgage, as Mom used to put it. I'd never seen the actual mortgage bill. Never had a contract. Never had my name on any deed. But they spoke like it was my duty, like I'd signed something sacred the day I turned 21 and got my first salaried job. And now that I'd gone 6 months without sending a dime, they were acting like I'd defaulted on a loan. Still something gnawed at me. I didn't want to reply, but I needed to know. So I called the bank. Customer service picked up after 3 rings. I gave the address, confirmed who I was, tried to keep my voice neutral. Can you tell me the current status of the mortgage on 4113 Crest Hill Drive? There was a pause, a few keyboard clicks. Then he said, that account is 8 months delinquent. It's currently in pre-foreclosure. Final notice was mailed 3 weeks ago. 8 months. Even while I was still sending money, I hung up hands cold. A tightness crept into my chest that wasn't panic, it was clarity. That house, the one I helped pay for the one I'd left behind, was never being taken care of. The money I sent wasn't going to the mortgage. It was going somewhere else. I opened my budgeting spreadsheet, traced every transfer, every withdrawal, every short-term favor, groceries, utilities, car repairs, Jesse's laptop, Dad's prescriptions, and now a house about to be taken by the bank. Over $18,000. And nothing to show for it. I didn't know what to feel. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shocked. I was done. Still, I made one last call. To Jesse. He picked up on the first ring. Rachel, finally. Mom's freaking out. The bank sent another letter. What's your plan? My plan. I'm not involved with that house anymore, I said flatly. He sighed. Don't play dumb. You've been paying the mortgage all this time. Then you just cut us off and now the bank's threatening foreclosure. Don't you feel any responsibility? Responsibility. I bit my tongue. What about the money I sent for 8 months straight? Who used it? Where did it go? There was silence on the line. Then Jesse mumbled, I don't know. Mom said you were only covering part of it. The rest must have come up short. And you, I snapped. You live there. You didn't notice the bank notices? Didn't notice when the power got shut off and turned back on? You didn't wonder why? What are you trying to say? He shot back. We're struggling. You're out there living comfortably while we're about to lose the house. Comfortably? I laughed, cold, brittle, dry. I'm not your backup plan anymore, Jesse. And don't say we. I'm not part of that group. I hung up. 3 minutes later, Mom called. I didn't answer. Her text came seconds later. Rachel, I'm sorry if you felt pressured, but this house is yours too. You'll regret it if we lose it. And right then I saw it. Crystal clear. I was never the daughter, never the equal. I was the account, the bailout, the invisible insurance policy they cashed over and over. They didn't love me, they depended on me, and they resented me the moment I stopped playing my role. And no amount of guilt apology or begging would change the one thing I had finally learned: I couldn't save a house I never truly belonged to. And I couldn't belong to people who never once saved space for me. Hoy ChatGPT. That night, I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by torn envelopes and old receipts, a half-drunk cup of tea cooling beside me as I stared down at the mortgage letter once more. I don't know why I hadn't thrown it away yet. Maybe I needed to see it just a little longer. Maybe I needed the proof. Proof that everything I'd suspected for years wasn't just paranoia. It was real. They used me. Not once, not by accident, but systematically. And the most infuriating part, they thought I wouldn't notice. Or worse, they thought I'd notice and still come running. I scrolled through old messages, hundreds of them. From Mom just this once. I know it's a lot, but you're doing well, right? We'd be lost without you. From Dad, you've always been the responsible one. Sweetheart, don't let emotions cloud your duty. From Jesse, whatever, it's not like you have your own family to support. It took 3 full swipes to get to the oldest message in our family group chat. So I did what I should have done long ago. I called them. One last time. Mom picked up almost immediately. Rachel. Her voice was syrupy but tight. We're just talking about you. Of course you are, I thought. I could hear Dad in the background tapping his ring against the kitchen table like he always did when he was anxious. Jesse was probably listening in with that same scowl he'd worn since high school. I just want to ask one thing, I said. No greetings, no preamble. 8 months ago I was still sending mortgage payments. Where did that money go? Silence. Not even a breath. Then Mom stammered, well, your dad needed dental work, and Jesse's car broke down, and, groceries, living expenses, everything piled up. Dad cut in. We didn't mean to mislead you, but you left. If you had stayed, none of this would have happened. I closed my eyes, breathed in slowly. No, I said. If I had stayed, you would have kept lying. You would have kept spending. You would have kept draining me while pretending you were proud of me. Mom's voice snapped. Rachel, don't be ungrateful. I carried you for 9 months. And now, when we're about to lose everything, you just turn your back. What happened to family? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let the heat boil over. I kept my tone flat, controlled, final. I'm not ungrateful, but I'm not stupid anymore either. More silence. Then I went on, voice sharper now, unshakable. I'm your daughter, not your bank, not your safety net, not your excuse for avoiding reality. And I will not be the reason Jesse learns nothing about consequence. I will not be the buffer between Dad's bad planning and the bank's final notice. I could hear Jesse in the background now yelling, You think you're better than us. Without us, you'd be nothing. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it proved everything. I didn't succeed because of you, I said. I succeeded despite you. Mom started to cry. Dad muttered something under his breath. Jesse kept ranting, but none of it mattered anymore. They could spin whatever story they needed. To relatives, to neighbors, to themselves. But I had nothing left to give. I wish you all the best, I said. But from now on, you own your choices. And if anyone asks why I walked away, tell them the truth. You spent the money I sent, lied to me, and expected me to keep saving you. And then I hung up. My hand didn't tremble. My breath stayed even. I opened my contacts, blocked all 3. Not from hate, but from self-preservation. And then I typed one final message in the family group chat. I'm not your backup plan anymore. Goodbye. And I left the group. For the first time in my life, my phone was silent. Truly silent. And it felt like breathing for the very first time. I sat there staring at the blank screen of my phone, almost waiting for it to light up again. Another ping, another excuse, another accusation. But nothing came. No guilt-laced text, no missed call, no barrage of voice notes pretending this hadn't just happened. Just stillness. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. I smiled. Not a big victorious grin. Just a quiet, relieved kind of smile, like slipping off a too tight pair of shoes after walking in them for years. I brewed a cup of peppermint tea. The scent filled the apartment like a soft memory of something I never had growing up, peace. I curled up on my thrifted couch blanket over my knees and just sat. No planning. No bracing for the next blow. No running calculations in my head about how much I could afford to lend them just one more time. It was over. They didn't know it yet, but I did. And in that moment, it was enough. Outside my window, the sun had dipped low, casting streaks of gold and orange across the skyline. I watched the light shift on my walls, dancing softly like it finally had permission to stay. For so long, I had convinced myself that keeping my family afloat was my highest calling, that if I stopped, the whole house would collapse and it would be my fault. But what I see clearly now is this: I wasn't keeping them afloat. I was being drowned. By expectations. By guilt. By silence disguised as love. The next day, I woke up with no dread curling in my stomach. I opened the blinds, let the light in, and made breakfast like it was a new tradition. 2 eggs, sourdough toast, and coffee I didn't have to share with anyone. I logged into my savings account and scheduled a small transfer to myself. Just $100 into a new travel fund. Nothing big. But it felt like planting a flag on new land. A declaration that this life belonged to me now. Then I opened my journal and wrote one sentence: I am not their apology. That line stayed with me all week. Because for years I had waited for them to say sorry, to finally see me, to say we were wrong, you mattered. But the truth is, I no longer needed that. I didn't need an apology from people who didn't believe they hurt me. I didn't need acknowledgement to validate what I lived through. I had the receipts. I had the scars. I had the quiet strength that comes from choosing yourself when no one else will. And if you've ever waited for someone to say sorry, waited for the people who broke you to stitch you back together, maybe it's time to stop waiting. Because healing doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence you chose, boundaries you drew, a door you closed and never reopened. And if this chapter of my story feels even a little familiar to you, I hope you'll share your thoughts below. Because there's power in saying I'm done and meaning it. There's power in choosing peace, especially when it used to scare you. And if you believe in protecting your peace, your time, your energy. Don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and join us in building a space where self-worth comes first. Because maybe, just maybe, you deserve to stop being the backup plan too. Hoi ChatGPT. The mornings started to feel different after that. Not lighter, not magical, just real. And that was enough for me. I didn't wake up expecting things to be fixed. I didn't expect some cosmic reward for finally walking away. I didn't expect closure wrapped in a bow. But what I did find was space. Real space. The kind where I could stretch out my limbs without fear of bumping into someone else's demands. The kind where my first thought in the morning wasn't, did Jesse pay his credit card, or did Dad refill his prescription? It was simply, what do I want to do today? And let me tell you something strange: freedom feels weird at first. Especially when you've been conditioned to call obligation love. One Saturday morning, I stood on my balcony watering my little rosemary bush that had somehow survived 2 near deaths and 1 thunderstorm. Below me, the street was quiet except for a couple walking their dog and the sound of a distant lawnmower. I wasn't needed anywhere. No one was waiting for me to fix anything, and that felt terrifying. Because when you've been needed your whole life, it's easy to mistake usefulness for value. It took me weeks to separate those 2 ideas in my mind. To understand that just because no one was asking for my help didn't mean I had no purpose. I started doing small things just for me. I joined a local book club at the library. I cooked a real meal once a week, even if it was just for myself. I replaced the cheap rug in my hallway with one I actually liked. Tiny quiet rebellions. And somewhere between grocery trips and evening yoga, I got a letter from my employer. A promotion offer. Not because I begged. Not because I worked weekends without complaining. But because I was actually doing well. Focused. Centered. Present. It felt surreal getting rewarded for showing up fully in my own life. I celebrated alone that night. No champagne, just a glass of red wine, my favorite jazz playlist, and the quiet flicker of a candle on the kitchen counter. I toasted to myself, not the version who endured everything, but the version who finally said no. That version deserved to be seen. The texts from my parents slowed, then stopped. I didn't block them out of spite. I left that door closed out of necessity. Because every time I cracked it open before a flood came rushing in reminders of who they needed me to be and how small I had to become to stay loved. But now I loved myself more than that. And I hope if you're reading this, if you've ever felt like the only way to stay in someone's life was to be their cushion, their fixer, their quiet provider, you'll hear this. You don't owe anyone your erosion. Love isn't supposed to cost you you. And if you've ever needed permission to put yourself first, let this be it. Let this be the moment you draw your line. Let this be the breath you've held for years, finally exhaled. And if this resonates with you even just a little, I want to hear it. Drop a comment. Tell me what boundary you've been too afraid to set, what silence you've mistaken for peace. Because we heal in community too. And if this story speaks to you, if you're done being quiet to keep others comfortable, hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Not for me, for you. Because every time we say this is where I end and they begin, we get a little closer to the lives we actually deserve. It had been almost 2 months since I walked out of that house, and still part of me waited for the blowback to die down. Like maybe one day they'd stop trying to reel me back in with guilt. That one day they'd see what they'd done. But the truth is, people rarely change when they're still benefiting from the way things are. And my absence wasn't an invitation for reflection. It was an inconvenience. Then on a rainy Thursday afternoon, I checked the mail and found another envelope. No name, no return address, just the familiar logo of the bank in the top corner. My stomach tightened, not from fear, but a deep, tired knowing. I opened it with the same quiet dread you have when facing a truth you already suspect. Final foreclosure notice. I sat on the floor by the door, rain tapping softly against the window, and read the letter twice. The house, the one I'd paid toward, sacrificed for, fought to keep steady, was being repossessed. And for a brief second, I felt nothing. Not sadness. Not panic. Not even anger. Just a strange, clean emptiness. That house had never really been mine. Not the mortgage, not the walls, not the space, and certainly not the people inside. I remembered all the times I walked through its doors with bags of groceries, arms aching, salary already sliced by bills that weren't mine. And no one ever looked up. No one ever said, "How are you holding up?" Not once. But now that the roof was caving in, I was suddenly central again, as if my worth only existed in what I could prevent. That night, Jesse called again. I let it ring. Then Mom, then Dad. Still, I didn't answer. I made tea, curled under a blanket, and watched the rain slide down my window like old grief making its way out. I didn't owe them another conversation, but I did owe myself one more closure. So I opened my journal and wrote, "You can't save a structure that was never built to shelter you." The next morning, I opened my phone and scrolled through the endless stream of texts. "Rachel, please, just talk to us. This house is part of you. You'll regret this when we're on the street. You're not family if you let us fall." Each message was a brick thrown through the window of peace I'd spent months rebuilding. And yet none of it landed. Because they weren't really speaking to me. They were speaking to the version of me they'd constructed, obedient, reliable, quiet. That girl was gone. And the woman who replaced her, she wasn't coming back to set fires she didn't start. She wasn't coming back to patch walls with her bare hands while everyone else sat watching TV. She wasn't coming back to plug holes in a sinking ship with her last paycheck and a forced smile. She was done. And if you've ever been told that choosing yourself makes you heartless, let me tell you something they don't want you to believe. Choosing yourself is not cruelty. It's survival. It's sanity. It's sovereignty. And you don't have to apologize for reclaiming it. Not to anyone. Not even blood. Later that week, as I folded laundry and sipped lukewarm coffee, I got a notification one I hadn't seen in a while. A new message in the family group chat. I had left the group weeks ago, but somehow they'd re-added me. Or maybe they never removed me at all. Maybe they needed me to see it. Mom had written, "Rachel, I know you're upset, but it's not as simple as you think. Your dad's insurance lapsed. Jesse has no one else. If the bank takes the house, people will say we raised a heartless daughter." Right below, a message from Dad's sweetheart. "This is still your home too. You really want to see your family on the street." And then Jesse, blunt as ever, "Fine. Walk away. See who helps you when you fall." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, not because I wanted to reply, but because I was stunned by how familiar this all was. Guilt. Fear. Threats dressed as concern. But the most chilling realization, they believed it. They truly thought that their well-being was mine to carry. That I owed them not only my past, but my future. That love was a transaction I had to keep making no matter how much debt it put me in. They had built a whole economy around me, where kindness was taxed. Where silence was assumed to be compliance. Where every yes I gave became a new baseline for what was expected next. And every no, a betrayal. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched the sun break through gray clouds. Somewhere inside me, something cracked, but it wasn't pain. It was clarity. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. They missed my wallet, my reliability, my silence. I grabbed my phone and called. Not to rejoin, but to end it. Mom picked up on the first ring. Her voice had that forced softness, the one she used in front of neighbors. Rachel, I'm so glad you called. Your dad and I have been talking. I cut her off. I just want to know one thing. She hesitated. Okay. I kept my voice calm. 8 months ago, I was still sending money for the mortgage. Where did it go? There was a pause. Then she stammered. Well, your father needed dental work. Jesse's car had that issue with the radiator. And you know how things add up. We meant to use it for the house, but life happened. Dad jumped in, voice defensive. We didn't do this on purpose. You just left. If you'd stayed, maybe things wouldn't have gotten this bad. I almost laughed. If I'd stayed, you would have spent every cent and still blame me when it ran out. Mom's voice turned sharp. Don't be so ungrateful. I carried you for 9 months, and now you leave us in our time of need. No, I replied. I'm not ungrateful, but I'm done being stupid. The silence on the line was heavy. I continued. I am not your savings account. I am not your fallback plan. I am not your financial band-aid for wounds you keep reopening. And then, as if on cue, Jesse's voice cut in from the background. You think you're better than us? Without us, you'd be nothing. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed everything. I didn't succeed because of you, I said softly. I succeeded despite you. Mom sniffled. Dad sighed. Jesse cursed. And I felt clean. I wish you well, I said. But from now on, you own your choices. If anyone asks why I'm not in your life, tell them the truth. You spent the money I sent. You hid the foreclosure. You refused to take responsibility. And then I hung up. No trembling. No second thoughts. Just one quiet thought: I don't owe you the pieces of me you kept breaking. I didn't cry after that call. I didn't curl up on the couch in heartbreak. I didn't spiral through old photos looking for pieces of love to salvage. Instead, I brewed a cup of chamomile tea, dimmed the lights in my apartment, and sat cross-legged on the rug, listening to nothing but the ticking of the wall clock. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not joy, not pride, but stillness. A complete, undisturbed stillness that came from knowing I had finally said everything I needed to say. The next morning, I did what I never thought I'd do. I opened my phone, pulled up my contact list, and blocked them all. Mom, Dad, Jesse. Not out of anger, not to punish them, but because I had learned the most important boundary of all. Protect your peace like it's rent-controlled. Because once you get it, you can't afford to lose it again. And then in the family group chat I hadn't opened in weeks, I typed one final message. I'm not your backup plan anymore, goodbye. Then I left the group. No explosion, no theatrics, just exit. And just like that, the silence that followed didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like home. No more 2 a.m. buzzes asking for just a little help. No more emotional hostage situations dressed as phone calls. No more being measured by how much I gave, only to be blamed the second I stopped. That night, as the sun dipped below the skyline and spilled gold across my walls, I lit a candle. The flicker of its flame reminded me of something I'd once read in a book. The fire you feed will keep you warm or burn you alive. And I realized, for years I had fed everyone else's fire while freezing in the corner. No more. I curled up on the couch with a new book flipped open the first chapter and read the opening line 3 times before it truly landed. She didn't leave because she stopped loving them. She left because she started loving herself. That line, that was it. That was the truth I'd been building toward all along. It didn't matter that they didn't see it. It mattered that I did. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing their approval. Wasn't proving my worth through sacrifice. Wasn't dimming my light so no one else would squint. I was just living, quietly, freely, fully. And if this chapter of my life has taught me anything, it's this: you are not obligated to keep bleeding just because someone else refuses to heal. You are not selfish for saving yourself. You are not heartless for walking away from a fire you didn't start. And if any part of my story feels familiar, if you've ever sat in a room full of people who claimed to love you, but somehow made you feel small, then you already know. The bravest thing you'll ever do is walk away without burning the whole thing down. Just walk, with your head high and your heart finally your own. Hoi, ChatGPT. 6 months have passed since that final call. No more letters, no more pleading texts, no more accusations wrapped in family language. The silence has stayed. But this time it isn't the kind that presses on your chest and whispers you're alone. It's the kind that lets you breathe deeper. The kind that lets you choose. I've made a life here. Not extravagant, not Instagram perfect, but honest. Every morning I brew coffee in the same chipped mug. I journal before work, light a lavender candle when I get home, and water the little herb garden that somehow keeps thriving even when I forget for days. I pay my own bills on time. I read at night instead of bracing for crisis. I've learned to fall asleep without one eye on the phone. I even started therapy not because I'm broken, but because I wanted to understand why I waited so long to stop breaking myself for others. And here's the truth that hurts a little to admit. I'm still grieving. Not for them, but for the version of me who believed love had to be earned. For the girl who thought boundaries were betrayal. Who believed silence meant safety. Who gave until she vanished. Some days I miss the idea of a family. The concept of unconditional love, of being held without having to hold everyone else. But then I remember, I do have love. I have friends who text just to say, "You crossed my mind today." I have coworkers who say, "Go rest, we've got this." I have my own voice finally, and it no longer shakes when I use it. And most importantly, I have myself. Fully, finally, fiercely. If you're listening to this and any part of it feels like your story, I hope you hear me now. You are not a failure for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for saying no. You are not broken for wanting peace. And you're not alone. There's a quiet kind of courage in leaving, in staying gone, in not answering when they only call to reopen old wounds. There's strength in rebuilding, not in spite of them, but for you. You may not get an apology. You may not get closure. You may never be seen by them in the way you hoped. But you get to choose who you become next. And that's more powerful than any "I'm sorry" they'll never say. So if this is the moment you've been waiting for, your sign to let go, your reminder that you're allowed to begin again, then let it be this. You are not their backup plan. You are your own plan A. And if my voice reached you in the quiet, if my story touched a part of yours, I ask one thing just as gently. If you believe in choosing your peace and reclaiming your worth and breaking cycles instead of staying trapped inside them, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Because we don't owe our lives to the people who taught us to disappear. We owe it to the people we're becoming, the ones finally learning how to stay. Some endings aren't explosions, they're just quiet closures. Like a door that gently clicks shut, not because it was slammed, but because it was finally time to leave. That's how I think of my story now, not as a tragedy, not as a betrayal, but as a release. I walk different these days, not lighter exactly, but freer. There's no weight dragging behind me, no invisible thread tying me to people who only saw me as what I could provide. There's just space. And in that space, I've found things I never thought I could have. Stillness, clarity, myself. I still have moments where the old voice creeps in. What if you had just held on longer? What if they change? But now I know how to answer. I held on long enough, and I changed. Because healing isn't just about cutting ties. It's about learning to stop tying yourself in knots to be loved. So to anyone who's been the strong one, the silent one, the one who gave and gave until they were empty, I see you. You don't have to prove your worth by how much you endure. You are allowed to take up space, to say no, to rest, to leave. And you're allowed to begin again, on your terms. Thank you for walking through this story with me. If it echoed something in your heart, let's keep the conversation going. Leave a comment below. Let someone else know they're not alone. And if you believe in stories that remind us we deserve more peace, more respect, more freedom, subscribe, and let's write the next chapter together.